The ground forces of the Russian Federation are the land forces of the Russian Armed Forces. It is also simply referred to as the Russian Army. The primary responsibilities of the Russian ground forces are the protection of the state borders, combat on land, the security of occupied territories, and the defeat of enemy troops. The ground forces must be able to achieve these goals both in nuclear war and non-nuclear war, especially without the use of weapons of mass destruction. Furthermore, they must be capable of protecting the national interests of Russia within the framework of its international obligations. The main command of the ground forces is officially tasked with the following objectives. As the Soviet Union dissolved, efforts were made to keep the Soviet armed forces as a single military structure for the new Commonwealth of Independent States. The last Minister of Defense of the Soviet Union, Marshal Yevgeny Shaposhnikov, was appointed Supreme Commander of the CIA's armed forces in December 1991. Among the numerous treaties signed by the former republics, in order to direct the transition period, was a temporary agreement on general-purpose forces, signed in Minsk on 14 February 1992. However, once it became clear that Ukraine was determined to undermine the concept of joint general-purpose forces and form their own armed forces, the new Russian government moved to form its own armed forces. Russian President Boris Yeltsin signed a decree forming the Russian Ministry of Defense on 7 May 1992, establishing the Russian ground forces along with the other branches of the military. At the same time, the General Staff was in the process of withdrawing tens of thousands of personnel from the group of Soviet forces in Germany, the Northern Group of Forces in Poland, the Central Group of Forces in Czechoslovakia, the Southern Group of Forces in Hungary, and from Mongolia. 37 divisions had to be withdrawn from the 4 groups of forces in the Baltic states, and 4 military districts, totaling 57 divisions, were handed over to Belarus and Ukraine. Some idea of the scale of the withdrawal can be gained from the division list for the dissolving Soviet ground forces. The withdrawal from the former Warsaw Pact states and the Baltic states was an extremely demanding, expensive, and debilitating process, as the military districts that remained in Russia after the collapse of the Union consisted mostly of the mobile cadre formations. The ground forces were, to a large extent, created by relocating the formerly full-strength formations from Eastern Europe to under-resourced districts. However, the facilities in those districts were inadequate to house the flood of personnel and equipment returning from abroad, and many units were unloaded from the rail wagons into empty fields. The need for destruction and transfer of large amounts of weaponry under the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe also necessitated great adjustments. The Ministry of Defense newspaper Krasnaya Zvezda published a reform plan on 21 July 1992. Later, one commentator said it was hastily put together by the General Staff to satisfy the public demand for radical changes. The General Staff, from that point, became a bastion of conservatism, causing a buildup of troubles that later became critical. The reform plan advocated a change from an army division regiment structure to a corps brigade arrangement. The new structures were to be more capable in a situation with no front line, and more capable of independent action at all levels, cutting out a level of command, omitting 2 out of 3 higher echelons between the theater headquarters and the fighting battalions, would produce economies, increase flexibility, and simplify command and control arrangements. The expected changeover to the new structure proved to be rare, irregular, and sometimes reversed. The new brigades that appeared were mostly divisions that had broken down until they happened to be at the proposed brigade strengths. New divisions, such as the new 3rd Motor Rifle Division in the Moscow Military District, formed on the basis of disbanding tank formations, were formed, rather than new brigades. Few of the reforms planned in the early 1990s eventuated, for 3 reasons. Firstly, there was an absence of firm civilian political guidance, with President Yeltsin primarily interested in ensuring that the armed forces were controllable and loyal, rather than reformed. Secondly, declining funding worsened the progress. Finally, there was no firm consensus within the military about what reforms should be implemented. General Pavel Grachev, the first Russian Minister of Defense, broadly advertised reforms, yet wished to preserve the old Soviet-style army, with large numbers of low-strength formations and continued mass conscription. The General Staff and the armed services tried to preserve Soviet-era doctrines, deployments, weapons, and missions in the absence